In this video, we're diving into the ultimate pre-trip checklist for offshore boating, because knowing what to check for before you go could be the difference between returning back under your own power or having to make that dreaded call to vessel assist for a tow back to the harbor.
No way to fix it at sea. Nobody predicted that that was going to happen. I mean, you learn the hard way, they say, right? It made me want to learn everything I could about that particular drive system. So I come in and I have a daily preparation of stuff that we do. And then we have a monthly preparation. And then there's just a general, overview. If you stay on top of stuff, you have a much better chance of having that much better of an experience out there. You have to learn how to work on all this stuff. You have to know how to do some basic things, because if you don't, you could get stuck out there. And if you practice a couple little things that take 10 or 15 minutes to understand, it could save you hours and thousands of dollars of headache. So that's the goal, is to just stay in front of things, have a playbook. And execute those plays by proper maintenance.
Trial by error, like you made mistakes along the way, now you're like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
this is kind of, I feel like
absolutely.
the amount of hours turns into a lot of knowledge, which then turns into just being more.
Yeah, you need to get towed back from Anacapa backwards because your outdrive cable broke and you didn't know how to change it. So, and that's a true story. We had a cable that broke on an outdrive, and the only way to get home was to either get towed or go in reverse. And it took 8.5 hours to get home from Anacapa in reverse, but we made it home. This is like vessel assist days. If a cable breaks, you have to know how to override that cable, because a lot of stuff has very simple, basic things that you can override and not have to wait or depend on somebody else to fix it for you. So,
are you typically, like, let's say we're gonna go fishing, you kind of have an idea, like the goals to go fish in 4 days. Like, when do you start preparation, or is preparation already begun for that trip?
Depends on the boat, but typically speaking, the boat in general during its ownership, before you even think about going out on the water, should meet a certain expectation. It should have systems that are ready to go. It's very odd to find something that I didn't know about if I plan properly. So, for instance, like we'll run through a checklist of this engine, and you'll see by some of the things that I'm looking at how if you didn't check those and they failed, what time it's going to cost you to fix them then versus being a little proactive now. So it's just a matter of trial and error a lot of times that I've learned things, but you're much better off preparing yourself for a trip.
How long does it take to go through an engine checklist?
A rapid mode of visual and I've got 10 different things going on versus one at a time thing. Like I'm looking at the fuel filters, noticing where their valves are, noticing the bowls don't have any water in them. I've already looked at the starter cable, and I've looked at anything that might be chafing on the motor, where that's almost like natural to me. But I want to get somebody in here to do a systematic list of things. So you're probably taking about 15 minutes per engine per side, and then a general 10 minutes in the engine room to really be proactive.
Wherever you want to start with the engine room, maybe we can walk through and kind of start come back that direction,
So,
and kind of start however you want to start your checks.
Let me think about this for a minute.
Or we can go back in the top.
So we'll just kind of maybe walk. If you bring the camera in this way, I could be over the engine, and we'll do a check on the coolant. We'll do oil. I'll do a general overview of anything that might be chafing or needs a chafe guard or a clamp that might be missing. Hopefully I can find something on here. We'll exercise the through holes. We'll go to the fuel filters. We'll go to the shaft seals. And then we'll look at the exhaust system. That pretty much encompasses the entire engine per se. We're looking for oil leaks, fuel leaks. If I've wiped everything down after my last trip, like we do every trip, there shouldn't be anything underneath these motors. When I come back from the trip, there should be a clean diaper underneath it. If there's a leak, I can see what it is. There's color coding on all the liquids that we use on these motors for a reason. So I'm not tracking down certain, well, what is this? You know, is this diesel? Is this antifreeze? Is it coolant? So we use blue for our coolant. We use red for our steering. You have dye in the diesel. You got clean oil for transmission. And you've got typically dirtier looking oil in the engines. So you see a drip and it's dark, boom, it's probably oil pan or something in that zone there. If it's clear, 90% of the time it's a fluid leak from your transmission.
Got it.
So if you see blue, you know right away it's coolant. If you see red, it could be steering fluid or it could be diesel. So it gives you some synergy on where to look, you know, by having those different colors. If everything was the same color, then you'd be like, oh God, now what? So Cummins was really smart. They went to a blue coolant.
Seems like most of your check is involving the engine room. For these things that could go wrong, when they go wrong, it's kind of engine room, or is there another, what's overlooked as far as things that people don't check as much that are usually,
I think we've talked about it in a couple of past episodes where we check, you know, the anchor system. Anchoring's, like I said, it's like on top 5 things of safety you gotta know. You know, there's radio, there's anchoring, there's engine stuff, there's safety gear, there's fire equipment, that kind of stuff. But anchoring on the outside of the engine room, that's probably one of the things I like to talk about the most. Maneuverability of the boat, checking the steering system before you leave the dock, checking the shifters before you leave the dock, knowing your rudders are centered in a twin engine boat before you leave the dock. Not only relying on the displays, but coming down here and physically looking at the rudder posts and seeing they're centered. So now if you go up and this is off, the rudder angle indicator says it's 20 degrees to the starboard, and you know you were just back there and visually saw it, well, somebody messed with the calibration of the feedback, or somebody stepped on it or threw a washdown bucket on it and broke it off. But knowing how to like physically see it centered takes the guessing out of it, because you can't steer the boat with the throttles unless those rudders are straight. 68-foot Elliott, built in 1983 in California. It's one of the most iconic sport fishers and yacht fishers built back in the day. And I'm fortunate enough to be the manager of this vessel and also the captain aboard the boat. And we're going to do an engine room test, or just an engine room check through, I should say. Things that we typically want to look at before we're leaving the harbor on a trip. You've got your coolant, which is up here. And on this particular engine, they use a blue coolant, and that goes through the freshwater side of things. You want to make sure that the levels are good, and you always want to check your coolant when the engine is in a cooled down position, not in a operating temperature, because when you pull that cap, you could really get hurt if you have a lot of pressure in the system. So I always test the pressure on this hose right here. I just make sure it's not over pressurized. I'll take a rag, I'll go over the top of the radiator cap, just like you would in any other engine. Pull the cap, pop your finger in there, make sure you got a little bit of coolant on it. And if this is full. This line goes to the expansion tank, so if it heats up, you're going to have an expansion. We should have a little bit of fluid in here, but we just did a fluid change on it, and it's probably burping through the system. So I'm going to check the coolant. Then we're going to go to the dipstick for the engine oil, which is located here on the side on this particular motor. And it's going to have somewhat of a dark color because you can't get all the contaminants out of this oil even with a fresh oil change. So it does have a little bit more color. Once you start it up, it's going to be a little darker. The viscosity of the oil is going to break down over hours. The engine oil's here, and then you always have to check the transmission oil as well, which is back here. Same similar dipstick style. We're going to pull it. We're going to check the level. You can see that the oil is much cleaner here. It's not as ablated as the engine oil gets, so it has a clearer color. And I know I'm mentioning a couple of different colors here, but color is important because it'll help you track down any leaks that you might have throughout the usage in the day. Clean oil would be more conducive to the transmission. Dirty oil would be the engine itself. In this case, blue would be the coolant. And then if we had any fuel leaks, it would be red, because in California, our fuel is dyed. So it's a dyed marine diesel. So I'm basically just looking at the engine overall, make sure I don't see any leaks, checked my levels. And now I'm going to make sure that I take a real quick brief look around the entire engine, see if there's anything that might be chafing. This is all good here. This is good here. And then after I'm done overseeing the motor, I'm going to go to its cooling water. This is the valve that pulls the seawater through this valve, through the sea strainer into the motor to cool the marine exhaust end of things. So if I'm not operating the boat, I shut my valves off for safety, and it also ensures that I come down and exercise it. Valve typically perpendicular means it's shut off, inline means it's on. So now I've got water flow, I can go start this motor. If you ever wanted to check this, you'd obviously shut this to restrict the water flow from coming in. This is where the strainer is. If there's any kelp or any debris before it gets to the motor, gets filtered out here, you simply undo these, drop this out, pull a screen, clean it, put it back in, shut it, and then re-engage water to the motor. The only other thing I look at is fan belts, see if there's any chafing, which I don't see. And then back here, where the drivetrain is, I want to make sure that we've got the exhaust system looks tight. There's no smoke, or there's no residue anywhere. There's no drips and leaks. This is where the salt water gets injected into the mixer, which deploys it out the back of the boat via a muffler and out the back of the boat, or in some cases underneath the boat. That's the water that's coming in through the engine. This is where the shaft leaves the boat, and this is called a shaft brush, which takes care of the bonding. Any galvanic corrosion, you're safe with the shaft brush, and it's just up there tightly. And then this here is your shaft seal. This unit is called a PSS. It's a dripless shaft seal. It has water injection that cools it, but it's a very popular unit. And these bellows and these clamps need to be looked at continuously, just to make sure that they aren't leaking. Through this passes the shaft, and then you get your rudder. Your propeller and stuff in the back of the boat, which is only visual if you're in the water, or out of the water, I should say. That pretty much handles the basic engine check. Outside of that, I'm looking at fuel levels. We got 2 Raycor fuel filters, and these show if there's any water in the tank. And if there was water, you wouldn't have this consistent red color. You'd have some red with clear, because obviously fuel rises, water drops. If there was water in here, we could put a bowl underneath here and simply drain that water out, shut it, and then re-engage the fuel level, therefore expelling the water that was in there that's designed to capture it here. In a later segment, we'll go through how to change filters and do the screens, but we're just giving you a general overview today. So that pretty much handles the engine aspect of things. We're just giving the engine room just an overview. Does it smell like fuel? Does it have any odor to it? Is it clean? Are there any leaks? I don't see anything. That's why we take care of it beforehand. Every trip we come back from, we wipe stuff down so we can start with a clean slate.
8 hours in reverse.
Oh yeah.
I'm still thinking about how difficult that would be.
That was fun. That was super fun. But that made me want to learn everything I could about that particular drive system, and it never happened to me again, obviously.
So do you think partly going through something that traumatic is okay, now I definitely need to learn?
Well, you learn the hard way, they say, right?
Yeah.
So nobody predicted that was going to happen, obviously, and there was no way to fix it at sea, regardless of me knowing how to do it. It turns out that would have been our only real only avenue to make it home. On this particular engine, this has electronic controls upstairs, but there's a portion of it that's cable. So what that means is I can override some of the electronic systems on the boat. So it's a semi-mechanical engine. So there's guys that have this philosophy that they don't want anything too modern and too electronic, because if it fails, you can't, you know, mechanically override it. This boat is designed for cruising, so you're going to have things pop up electronically, and you're going to be very, very glad that you had a semi-mechanical, you know, portion of this package. Is your bilge pump system. This particular boat is set up in a very unique manner where they've got two sides of the bilge, and then they have a center float as well. So theoretically, if there's water that comes into the bilge, it lifts one of these floats and you're going to hear an alarm turn on. It's very high pitched sound, and it's also audible, plus it's visual at the helm station. In addition to having one on each side, this starts to pump as it pops up automatically. If it really gets away from you, this is the one that you never want to hear. That's the, we call it the oh ship one. So we come down here and figure out what's going on, and that alerts us immediately. This boat has a couple of different compartments, so there's going to be floats in the aft section, the engine room, and what we call the utility room. So it's just designed to really give you an indication of if you're taking on water. It's very, very well thought out. The reason why you need to learn a lot of these float switches and understand where your bilges are, and also make sure that there's no debris, and that's why you keep things clean, is to be able to count on these things when you really need them. In the event there's a catastrophic water entry, we will at times utilize the engine's seawater intake system and actually use it as pumps to deploy water out if you had to really, really get nasty with it. We would have a hose that would come off of the back end of the strainer, and we would use each one of these engines as basically a pump. So that is something that we have it as a backup as well. So that's the rudder angle indicator. It tells me that that's, when it goes to 0, that should be center, and it is. So that's that whole rudder angle indication that we were talking about earlier, making sure your rudder has full throw back and forth. Let's say I went to one side and I didn't have that throw. Maybe something's in the way of it in the lazarette area. You know, it might be an obstruction. You don't want to find that out when you leave the dock. You want to know that before.
So do you think that pretty much your checklist starts here, then goes to the engine, because you're starting engines off, or you doing everything?
I tend to do the engine room first, and then the exterior second, and then the pilot house third. I know that a lot of this stuff is in place, like safety equipment and stuff typically, but for this purpose I'm going to go through each one of them for you.
Cool.
So normally what I'll do is when I get to the pilot house, I'll fire up all the electronics. I'll make sure that everything's got a GPS sensor that's working. I'll put the radar into motion, make sure it's operable. I'll transmit for a second just to make sure it's up and running. I'll check the depth sounder, make sure it's operable. I'll check the horn on the boat, and then we'll go into our steering system. And the steering system is that you can either, if you know it's center, by visually seeing the rudder boxes in the lazarette, you can do a count to one side and then count it back. Let's say 3 is hard over to starboard, 3 is back over to middle, and then the other 3 would be hard to port. You can also use a rudder angle indicator, and we have one on our autopilot. And if you notice, these numbers right now are 0, 0. I'm going to do a starboard turn, and you're going to see that number changing. This boat has 34 degrees, I believe, to hard over. There it is. And now I'm going to check the opposite, because you never know if something could be in the way of that steering arm down there if you didn't go physically look. And there we are, 35. So if I come back to 0, I should be center rudder. And that's going to enable me in a twin engine boat, when maneuvering, to use my neutral, forward, reverse, propulsion, suction to maneuver the boat properly. I always tap these. Once I start the boat, I tap the boat into quick gear and out of gear just to pull the fluid up to the transmissions. And now I know they're active and ready to go once I untie the line. When I give that deckhand the "are we clear?" and he gives me the clear, then I'm ready to move. So by checking all those things, I'm assured that my maneuverability is good, my navigation systems are working, and I can count on these items. The other thing would be the VHF radio. Do a quick transmit, maybe pull up weather to make sure the radio is receiving a signal, and then just squawk the mic for a second on any channel and make sure it's transmitting. So that assures you if you have an emergency, you can get on the radio.
How does satellite change the game?
This boat is set up with a plethora of communications. It's got a VHF radio, it's got a 2-meter radio, it has a sat phone, and it has a couple of scrambled frequency radios that we're actually going to be taking a lot of this stuff off. With the inception of the Starlink system, most of this stuff is pretty much gone by the wayside because it's really expensive to operate a sat phone versus having full Wi-Fi calling and internet capability via Starlink system. It's a game changer. I think almost every boat that leaves the dock should have a Starlink, honestly. I mean, for safety, just to be able to pick up the phone and you know, let somebody know you're going to be late, or you know, if you're coming in off a great trip and you didn't have cell service before and everybody's worried about you, you can pick up the phone. You know, communicating from boat to boat, being able to troubleshoot something on the water, it brings a ton of assurity to what your game is now. So I love it.
And Eric is available for hire if you're Starlink, you're looking for your own representative.
Oh God, yeah. I wish my first name starts with an E, but it's not that. You know, the other thing we talked about before leaving the dock, you should always check your windlass. That makes things very safe in the event that you have a system shut down. At least you can stop the boat from drifting into something or on the beach or into the channel, and you're securing your location, which buys you some time.
So bigger boat, bigger problems? Or is it just kind of more comfort zones? I mean, obviously there's people who pilot huge ships that come into the harbor and they're comfortable doing it, but
yeah,
I need this to be a little more intimidating to the
I think it's actually, what's funny is a lot of these larger boats are easier to drive than some of the smaller ones because they have such a footprint. They don't drift off as quickly. There is a lot of weight here. There's a ton of weight behind this boat, so you have to think ahead a little bit. But I'm a firm believer on just doing everything nice and easy, preparing for Murphy's Law, knowing, you know, for instance, a simple thing like being on the high side of the channel in the wind. If you have an engine problem, because if your engine shuts down and you're drifting into boats down channel, at least you have more space. Just things like that. Knowing your anchor is working is a huge plus. You know, deploying that anchor and stopping the boat and then able to figure out instead of fending off while you're banging into stuff is a huge game changer. But maneuvering these things is pretty darn easy. This boat doesn't have a bow thruster yet, but we're installing one on it. And there won't be any place I couldn't park this boat. I mean, I could do it with a millimeter on each side with that thruster because it's very, very easy to drive, believe it or not.
This boat has a little bit of history?
Yeah. So Elliott was built down in the LA area by a gentleman named Ted Elliott. And he basically designed custom yacht fishers for the West Coast. And I have had the fortune of representing numerous clients in the acquisitions of these iconic sport fishers. And this one is the last cold molded, which means fiberglass over wood boat that the Elliott company produced. And that's special to me because I love cold molded boats. And there's nothing wrong with fiberglass boats, but that's where everything kind of went. But there's just a genuine difference in feel on this boat. It's very similar to the Ex-Tuninator, the Island Fox, which is another iconic Elliott, the Diva, which is here in this harbor as well. It's just a very, when you cruise around in one of these things, there's just a lot of stuff to really appreciate. Some of the design is very, let's say, Elliott-ish, like the handrail on the going down to the galley from the pilot house, the bow rail. Like, I could look at a boat and tell you if it's an Elliott if you just showed me its bow rail. That's how, you know, prestigiously or distinguished they were from one another. Custom handles and latches, and there was a lot of craftsmanship that went into these boats. So this boat used to run a TV show called Outdoor Adventures, and it was owned by a gentleman by the name of Chris Fisher, and they basically took this boat up and down the coast of North America and South America and did some pretty special things with it. And its new life up here in Oxnard is going to be similar, but not as far-reaching. Let's just say that. So we're really excited about this boat. The other checks aboard the vessel that you're going to take is definitely going to be your safety gear. You want to ensure your fire extinguishers are all within compliance. You want to make sure people know where those fire extinguishers are. The operator should not be the only person that knows where all these things are. So we basically, before we depart, we'll do a quick safety briefing with everybody that's aboard the boat, and we'll remind them that the fire extinguisher doors are typically labeled. They'll know where the life jackets are in different locations on the boat. They'll know how to use, there's a guide that we have in the event that the captain or deckhand are incapacitated. We have basically a safety protocol sheet, which basically states, you know, the name of the vessel, some of the specs on the vessel, the coloration of the vessel. So if they got on the radio, per the instructions that are left in that pamphlet, they'd be able to explain to the Coast Guard, you know, what boat they're on. They get a very quick, formal, an informal, I should say, look at the GPS to know where your latitude and longitude is, so that you could call in for an emergency and let someone know where you were. So we point all these things out to them so that in the event that we're unable to do so, that there's still, you know, some sense of where the lifeboat is, where the life jackets are, and the safety equipment. So it's important.
And like always, if you enjoy this kind of content, like the video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you know exactly when we're posting videos like this.